Karen thought she was in charge and blocked my driveway with 5 huge containers, claiming that the land wasn't being used properly. I expected something from this woman, but not even in my worst nightmares did I think I'd come home to find 5 giant containers blocking my driveway. That's right, 5. It wasn't a car parked in the wrong place. It wasn't a little note stuck on my door. It wasn't a formal complaint full of complicated terms to try and intimidate. It was a metal wall, strategically placed to ensure that I didn't set foot on my own property. Now, if it was a misunderstanding, a mistake by the town hall or a poorly signposted construction site, I could take a deep breath and resolve the situation patiently. But I already knew that it had a name and a very specific face. The self-proclaimed neighborhood woman, the one who lives to turn other people's lives into bureaucratic hell. The only thing this woman loved more than rules was imposing her rules on people who hadn't asked for her opinion. And, apparently, she had now evolved to block vehicle entrances, like a cartoon villain. At that moment, I looked at the containers like someone looking at a war crime. They were perfectly aligned, as if they had been placed there by a logistics company with a lot of time on its hands. It wasn't something done in a hurry. No, it was something planned. The most comical detail? She'd gone to the trouble of having the containers painted beige. Yes, beige. The dullest, most depressing shade possible. And on one of them, attached with tape, a ridiculously formal statement from the HOA, saying that the space was now being relocated for the good of the community. Relocated. My driveway, my garage, my house. Apparently, they now belong to the collective, and to hell with me. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to decide whether to explode right there or take a more elaborate approach. I've always liked creative solutions. I walked around the containers, looking at every detail, the reinforced padlocks, the intact seals. She really didn't think anything or anyone would get through there without her divine blessing, but the best was yet to come. As I turned around, ready to start plotting my revenge, I saw her approaching, triumphant, with that gait that only insufferable people have when they think they've won. The smile of someone who thinks she owns the neighborhood. Ah, ma'am, little do you know. I crossed my arms and stood there, waiting. I wanted to see how far she was going to take this theater. When she got close, she adjusted her sunglasses and let out a sigh of satisfaction, as if she were admiring her greatest masterpiece. It looks great, don't you think? It's much more organized now. The level of brazenness caught me off guard. The woman was actually celebrating the installation of 5 monstrous bins in front of my house, as if she had done the world a favor. The only thing that stopped my brain from melting right then and there was the absolute certainty that she didn't know who the real owner of the property was. And that gave me ideas, because now I could do 2 things. I could explode and start screaming right there, calling the police, lawyers, and everything else. Or I could let the woman dig her own grave before taking down this piece of crap in a way she'd never forget. Guess which option I chose? The second, of course. And it was with a calm, almost polite smile that I looked at the containers, made a gesture of admiration, and said, "You know, I think you're right. It does look interesting." She blinked in surprise. It wasn't the reaction I was expecting. "Oh, I'm glad you see it that way. Some of the neighbors were a bit worried about the visual impact, but on the whole, I think everyone will get used to it." I held back my laughter. She had no idea that the moment she decided to put those containers there, she signed her own sentence, because she wasn't in charge of that property. It was me. So what now? Now I was going to have fun. My patience was already thin, but at that moment, seeing those 5 beggy metal containers lined up blocking my entrance, I felt like I was living a nightmare, concocted by the very demon of control and bureaucracy. The woman was still there, standing next to me, smiling with satisfaction, as if she had just renovated the Eiffel Tower. She really thought it was a victory. And I, on the other hand, could only think how much fun I was going to have when she discovered the absolute, unquestionable truth of this situation. The property was mine. But of course, I wasn't going to spoil the surprise just yet. No, no, I was going to savor every second of it. So I did what any sensible person would do. I feigned interest. I took a step back, crossed my arms, and looked at the containers as if I were analyzing a work of modern art. I tilted my head a little, looked thoughtful, and nodded in approval. She, on the other side, was practically bursting with pride, thinking that someone had finally recognized her organizational genius. "So, explain something to me," I said, adopting a genuinely curious tone. "What exactly led you to put these containers here?" The woman adjusted her sunglasses and assumed the classic pose of someone who thinks she has a doctorate in neighborhood management. Ah, it's simple. Her entrance was taking up unnecessary space. Her jaw almost hit the floor. "My entrance. Mine," she continued, as if she hadn't just unleashed the most absurd sentence of the year. "You see, the HOA has an urban aesthetic plan, and we decided that this area could be better used for temporary storage." I had to hold back my laughter. Temporary storage. Congratulations. Now my house was a public storage facility. But the icing on the cake came next. She pointed to the containers and, with a professorial air, explained, "Each one has an important function. This one will be used to store tools for the neighborhood. That other one is going to be a recycling center. And this last one, this one is going to be a support point for HOA employees." I felt an electric shock run down my spine. Not only had she blocked my entrance, she had plans to turn the place into a logistics center for the dam association. I took a deep breath, because I wasn't going to lose my temper there. Revenge is a dish best eaten cold, and hers was still warming up in the oven. "Wow, that sounds like a very ambitious project," I replied, feigning admiration. The woman smiled and nodded, thinking she had a new ally in her crusade against property rights. But then came the moment I had been waiting for the most. I let out a sigh, put my hands in my pockets, and dropped the bomb. "Curiosity, just so I understand. You had to ask permission to place these containers, right?" She looked at me as if I'd asked if the sky was blue. "Permission? Of course not." Ah, that was better than I expected. "So you mean you put all this in without talking to the owner?" Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "Well, not exactly. The HOA has the autonomy to make certain decisions." I shook my head in an almost understanding gesture. "I see. So you make decisions like that, straight away, without even consulting the owner of the property?" She nodded, trusting that I was finally seeing the light. It was then that I knew it was time to end the theater. I clapped my hands slowly and let out a long sigh. "Well then, I guess we have a problem. Why is this land here? It's mine." The silence that followed was worth every second of patience I'd had up to that point. Her expression froze. Her face went from normal to scarlet red in a matter of seconds. Her eyes widened, as if I had just cast a spell. She blinked a few times, trying to process what she'd heard, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Ah, now we were playing on the same level. I took a deep breath and continued. "That's right. That entrance you decided to block off? That area you thought was public? It belongs to me. I have a registered document, a signed deed. Everything is in order." She opened her mouth, closed it. She tried to speak again. She failed miserably. And then, finally, she managed to get something out. But that can't be right. The land was unmarked. I held in my laughter. "Ah, so now the HOA can just take possession of land that looks ownerless?" The woman knew she had screwed up. I could see it in her eyes. Desperation was already setting up the loading bar. "And there's more, my dear," I continued, moving a little closer, lowering my voice just to make sure she felt every word. "As well as being mine, this land is registered in the name of a company, and I own that company too." If before she was confused, now she was panicked. "Company? Owner. Does that mean—" Yes, it meant exactly what she was beginning to realize. The woman hadn't blocked just any neighbor. She had blocked the owner of the land on which she herself lived. She tried to say something, but only managed to get one out. That must be a mistake. But it wasn't, and I was going to prove it very soon. Because now that the truth was out in the open, the next step was simple. I was going to demolish this joke in a way that she would never forget. If regret could kill, that woman would already be buried under her own containers. The moment she found out it was my property was an Oscar-worthy spectacle. Her face went through 3 classic stages of public humiliation. Denial. Her brain simply refused to accept reality. Maybe it was a dream, a trick, some kind of interdimensional prank where I was lying to her. Panic. As soon as the brain processed that it was true, there came the desperate look, the trembling eyes, the sweating hand. It was like watching a house of cards collapse live. The bargain? Ah, that was the best part. She finally realized that she was completely screwed and tried to regain control of the situation with the only method she knew: supreme cockiness. Well, you see, maybe we can find a mutually beneficial solution. Mutually beneficial. She wanted to negotiate. After shoving 5 monstrous containers in front of my house without permission, I thought I'd get out on the basis of, we can sort this out, like adults. I stared at that woman as if she had just suggested that I donate a kidney to a crocodile. Do you want to negotiate? I asked, feigning interest. After all, this was all a big misunderstanding. I'm sure we can reach an amicable consensus. A big misunderstanding. She really was trying to turn a trespass crime into a minor technicality. But good. I was going to play her game and make her regret every second of it. I crossed my arms and nodded. All right. Then let's negotiate. How do you intend to make up for this misunderstanding? She blinked. She clearly didn't expect me to jump into this conversation so easily. Well, maybe we can relocate the containers to a place that's more convenient for you? I held in my laughter. Got it. So now I have to decide where the containers go? She forced a smile. That's right. We can even rethink some of the HOA's rules to avoid future misunderstandings. It was unbelievable. This woman was really trying to come out on top. But you know what happens when someone steps on someone else's neck for too long? Eventually, they step on the wrong neck. And today, it was her day to pay the bill. I like the idea of relocating the containers, she said calmly. She smiled, thinking she was winning. And then I continued. And I already know exactly where they can go. She arched her eyebrows, hopeful. Great. And where would that be? I smiled and pointed to her house. The smile disappeared. What? Well, if containers are so useful and so beautiful, you must love the idea of having them in your backyard. The look of sheer horror was a gift to my soul. This is ridiculous. I can't have 5 giant containers in my house. Oh, but I can have them in mine? Interesting. She was panting now, sweating more than a marathon runner in the desert, and I hadn't finished. By the way, I have another idea. Since you used my property without permission, I can use yours too. So I thought I'd open a public parking lot in your yard. After all, it's a close-knit neighborhood, isn't it? The woman went completely still. You can't do that. Do HOA rules matter now? Because, as far as I know, you made up your own last week. Her silence was a sweet, wonderful sound. But the final touch was still missing. After leaving the woman stewing in her own despair, I picked up my cell phone and called a towing company. Hello? I need to remove some containers from my property. Yes, 5. Yes, immediately. The woman's eyes widened. You can't do that. Well, I'm the owner, remember? While I was waiting for the tow trucks to arrive, I posted on the official HOA group. Attention, neighborhood. 5 containers have been illegally installed on my property. As the owner, I am removing all. If anyone has any complaints, please speak directly to the person responsible for the brilliant idea. And, of course, I marked her name. Minutes later, the first neighbors began to show up to watch the spectacle. What's going on? Has someone broken into his house? Wait, the HOA did that? And then, the best moment of the night arrived. The winches parked, the workers climbed down, and in less than an hour, Every single one of those begging, horrible, absurd containers was being loaded onto a truck. The woman screamed, gesticulated, spoke to someone on the phone begging for help, but no one wanted to know. She knew she was screwed. Before I left, I made a point of whispering to her, "You know what's funniest? You could have avoided all this if you'd just asked." And then, just to seal the public humiliation, I dropped another bombshell. Oh, and there's one more thing. I'm suing the HOA for trespassing and moral damages. Game over. The removal of the containers was one of the most beautiful scenes I've ever witnessed. The metallic noise of the cranes, the bang of the crates being lifted and thrown onto the trucks, the immediate relief at seeing my entrance free again. But that wasn't the real spectacle. It was the look of absolute shock on the face of the woman who had orchestrated all this tomfoolery. She stood there, paralyzed, her eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. Her once haughty face now seemed carved out of pure panic. Every time a container was removed, I saw a part of her ego crumble along with it. The neighborhood, of course, turned out in droves to watch the show. Some tried to disguise it by pretending they were just passing by, but the truth was that everyone was there for the gossip, and who could blame them? When was the last time anyone saw Karen from the HOA being publicly bashed? As the trucks loaded the containers far away from my house, I heard whispering and giggling among the neighbors. This has gone too far. How did she think she was going to get away with it? She thought she was in charge of everything. Now she's there. I bet she didn't even sleep last night, poor thing. Poor thing? Oh, please. If anyone there deserved compassion, it wasn't this woman. She didn't put those containers there by mistake. She did it because she wanted to show that she had power, that she could make arbitrary decisions without suffering consequences. But now she was suffering the consequences. I didn't say anything as I watched. I just stood there with my arms folded, enjoying every second of the show. But the best part came when the last container was loaded onto the truck. The driver closed the doors, climbed into the cab, and shifted into gear. With a loud rumble, the vehicle began to move, carrying away the last piece of the HOA's great work. And it was only then, when all was lost, that the woman tried to react. She turned to me, still wide-eyed, and let loose. "You had no right to do that." "Oh, that's a good one." I took a deep breath, looked her right in the eye, and asked, "Oh, so now you care about property rights? That's funny." Her silence was poetry. The neighbors were watching. Everyone was waiting for an answer, but she had nothing to say, because she knew she was wrong. So, with no other way out, she simply turned and walked away as if it hadn't been the greatest public humiliation of her life. But I knew that was only the beginning. The next day, I filed the lawsuit. My lawyer had all the documents ready, and the lawsuit was officially filed against the HOA. Trespassing, misuse of private area, moral damages. I didn't just want justice. I wanted this woman to never forget what had happened, and the effect was immediate. As soon as the summons was delivered, the HOA group collapsed. "What do you mean we're being sued? Who approved this? I don't pay fees to cover other people's mistakes." The woman, of course, tried to control the situation. She tried to argue that it was all just a misunderstanding, that the lawsuit was exaggerated. But nobody bought that excuse, because now it was the HOA's money that was at risk. If before the neighbors had followed her blindly, now they were ready to throw her to the wolves. And then something wonderful happened. One of the residents suggested a meeting to discuss removing her from office. And when that came up in the group, I knew the end was near. The meeting took place at the HOA's headquarters, a little event hall that they used to dictate rules and collect ridiculous fees from the residents. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. This time, no one was there to hear the woman speak. She tried to start the meeting with that authoritative tone she always used, but was quickly interrupted. "Let's get straight to the point. You got us into a lawsuit, and you didn't tell anyone. Are you going to pay for this with your money or ours? Because if it's with ours, I want to vote now." The woman went white. She knew there was no way out. She tried to blame it on administrative errors. She tried to minimize the case, but no one wanted to listen. And so the vote began, and the result was unanimous. She was out, dismissed, expelled, dethroned from her own ridiculous empire. I sat at the back of the room, watching it all with my arms crossed. When the decision was made official, I couldn't help but smile a little. She stood up, her eyes full of anger, but without the courage to look at anyone. She left the room without saying a word. And there, at that moment, the HOA died. The following weeks were a real circus. The woman tried everything to clean up her image. She said she was being wronged. She even tried to appeal against the HOA's decision. But nobody cared anymore. Her name became an inside joke in the neighborhood. And then, one fine day, I saw a moving truck stopped in front of her house. She was there, watching the movers take her furniture into the vehicle. She didn't say anything. She didn't look at anyone. She just made sure that everything was being removed as quickly as possible. She was moving out. I don't know if it was out of shame, social pressure, or simply because she couldn't stand living in a place where no one bowed to her anymore. But there she was, finally leaving. I stood on my balcony, watching everything with a cup of coffee in my hand. She saw me. I know she saw me, but she didn't say anything. She just got in her car, closed the door, and drove off. And that's how the HOA died along with her reign. Now, I had my house, my free entrance, and a neighborhood finally free of that ridiculous tyranny. And, of course, I used some of the money from the lawsuit to build a beautiful automatic gate, just to make sure no one ever tried to block my entrance again. And if you like this video, don't forget to leave a comment and a like.